Hello, in this video I'm going to give a basic introduction to arpeggios. So I'm going to talk about what an arpeggio is and why you might want to learn about them. And then after that I'm going to show you some ways to get started learning them on the bass. And hopefully they'll translate to guitar as well. So first things first, what is an arpeggio? So an arpeggio is created when you play the notes of a chord in sequence rather than all at the same time. So for example, this is a G major chord with the notes G, B and D played at the same time. The arpeggio sounds like this. There you go. If you're a guitarist, you might be thinking at this point, but when I play my G major chord, I play 6 strings. You only played 3 notes. What's going on there? And the answer to that is when you're playing your classic G major chord on the guitar, you're playing the notes G, B, D, G, B, G. So same notes, we just have some double ups. All right, so the first step to getting started learning these arpeggios is really understanding why you might want to learn them on the bass. Why can't you just, keep learning tabs for your favorite songs and not worry about this theory stuff? And of course, you can do that if you like. But if you want to be able to create your own music, your own melodies, your own improvisations, if you want to understand how to play notes that sound nice, then arpeggios are probably the best way to get started doing that. Because in pretty much all the songs that we know and love, there are chords happening, and the arpeggios tell us which notes are being played in each of those chords. And if you know those, and you know where to play them on your instrument, then you can play sounds and you can play music that fits in perfectly with the chords that are going by. And that's the fast track to sounding good. Obviously, when you develop and learn more about improvisation, you're going to get sick of playing just the notes in the chords, but that's for a future video perhaps. So the second step to learning arpeggios on your instrument, or on the bass in this case, is to have a visual representation of where the notes are. So for example, to find the G major arpeggio on the bass, we've got to find a G, which there's one right here on the 3rd fret of the E string. We need a B, there's one here on the 2nd fret of the A string, and a D, and there's one here on the 5th fret of the A string. You can also play the D on the open D string. You can play the G up here at the 5th fret of the D string. You can play the B here at the 4th fret of the G string, and so on and so forth. In this video, I'm going to assume that you have some knowledge of the fretboard, but if you don't, then that's probably worth practicing a little bit. So now that we have a sense of where these notes are, we have to use our hands to play them, which means we need some different kinesthetic representations for how to actually fret these notes. The first of 3 is to start with your middle finger on this 3rd fret of the E string, which is the G note, which then leaves the index finger in a convenient spot for the B, which is the 2nd fret of the A string, and then our 4th finger, supported by the others, can play the D on the 5th fret of the A string. That's shape number 1. The reason we use those different fingers is just so we don't have to move the whole hand. It's very efficient. So that's shape number 1, starting on the middle finger. Shape number 2 is starting on the index finger. So same fret, but we're playing the note with our index finger, and we're going to move the B to the 7th fret of the E string, and then you can play the D in the same spot. So that's the second way to physically play an arpeggio, the major arpeggio. The third way is using or starting on the 4th finger. So we've got the 3rd fret on the E string again, starting with the 4th finger, and then middle finger on the B, and then open D. There you go. So at the same time as we're testing out different kinesthetic representations, we're also finding new ways to visualize these arpeggios. The third and arguably most important aspect of the arpeggio is the sound, is getting the right notes. So as well as practicing the different physical shapes and being able to visualize these shapes, really, I guess the most important thing is paying attention to the sound that you're creating. What you might have noticed already is that the actual notes are exactly the same in each case with each different representation, which is great because we want as many different options to create the same sound as possible. So what I would suggest, if you want to take some of this information away and practice it and actually get used to playing these arpeggios, I would suggest starting with the arpeggio that I've shown, so the G major. Play it with those different shapes and with those different hand positions, and then see if you can take those visual representations of the fret patterns, move them to different places on the fretboard, and then try out those different physical representations as well. So for example, if you want to start here on this E flat, start with pattern number 1, pattern number 2, pattern number 3. And if you're not quite sure what those notes are, then spend some time working out what they are. And so in that case, you go, we've got an E flat, and then we've got a G, and then we've got a B flat. And that'll be very important for what I talk about in the third video on arpeggios, which is coming up shortly. So hopefully that helps. Enjoy.